Ooh, Scarpaccia, the summer edition. This high protein version of a summer classic has become quite a favorite around here. So gather your summer squash, whether it's from your garden or the grocery store, and let's make this. Over the past few days, we had a lot of rain, which meant that I wasn't out in the garden checking the squash plants as much as I usually would. And it turns out I had some pretty mature squashes that were growing. And if you've ever grown squash, you'll know that all it takes is like 2 or 3 days of you not finding it to get pretty big and sometimes unusable. Here I was doing the thumbnail test, where if you could gently press your nail into the squash, it still is tender, but it's just not ideal. Meaning it's usable, but the outside of the skin is a little tougher than you would normally like. And this recipe is perfect for a squash like that because it's cut so thin on the skin that you don't even notice that it has a tougher than desirable exterior shell. Now, normally I don't weigh the produce, I kind of just guesstimate it, but I just wanted to see how much we were working with here, and this was a little over 2 pounds altogether. This recipe calls for 2 pounds of squash, but sometimes if I have like a little bit extra, more than 2 pounds, you can't just use like a quarter of a squash. I mean, you could, but I don't. So sometimes I'll scoop out some of the seeds on the interior. That way it's just the right proportions, and this, the seeds aren't the best part. I made this recipe earlier in the week and I used a peeler, like a Y-shaped peeler instead of the mandolin, and it was doable. It took a little bit longer, so this time I decided to use the mandolin. I don't know how you feel about mandolins, but I have a probably more than healthy fear of a mandolin. I used to work in a restaurant and I once saw somebody cut their thumb pretty badly on a meat slicer, and ever since then, that thing scares me. After you slice it thin, you're going to salt the squash to help draw out the water. Summer squash is like notoriously just full of water, so you really want to do this to help draw some of that water out. And you don't add any additional water to this version of Scarpaccia because you already have enough in the squash. I put the salted squash to the side and let it sit for a half hour, and I'm taking those onions, slicing them as thin as I can, and I'm just going to mix it up with the squash and let it draw out the water from the onions as well. After the water's been drawn out, you'll notice that the squash is like a little bit kind of wilty looking, which is a good sign. It lets you know that it's starting to break down a little bit. I added the spices and then tossed it again. So after I mixed that together, I started adding the regular all-purpose flour and chickpea flour. Last fall, I found a recipe for a butternut squash scarpaccia with chickpea flour and polenta, and it was by, I think, Louise in the Kitchen from Instagram. It was amazing. It was so good. And so I wanted to see if the chickpea flour would work well with the summer squash, just like it did work well with the butternut squash. I'm happy to report back it did. It's delicious. It's so good. I've cooked with chickpea flour a handful of times before, and sometimes if it's just not cooked long enough, it still maintains like a chickpea-ish flavor, but like not in a good way. So this recipe is cooked for like 40 minutes in the oven, and so it really just like kind of like melds all together. It's shockingly good considering it's pretty limited in its ingredients. And I'm going to mix this together until there's no more dry spots. I don't know if you saw before when I started mixing it, there's like a little puddle of water on the bottom. That's from the salt that was drawing out the water from the squash and the onions. So if there's still dry spots, you can put like a little teaspoon of water, give it another mix, keep doing that until there's no dry spots, but you don't want it to be wet and soupy. So this worked perfectly with no water for me, but results might vary depending on your squash, I suppose. Then I got out my parchment paper and I sprayed it with a little bit of avocado oil. I sprinkled on some cornmeal, and then I started laying out the scarpaccia. So I just kind of like plopped it all around the tray. That way I could just press it down, spray it again with more of the avocado oil, sprinkle a little bit more of the cornmeal, and then put it in the center rack for about 35 to 45 minutes. So you're just going to keep checking. You'll notice that there's a little bit golden around the outside, and whenever it's kind of set, then you can take it out with little golden bits on the outside. This is one of those things that is so good. I just cut it with a pizza slicer and I left it on the counter, and people would pick at it throughout the day. You're eating a lot of your veggies. You're getting the protein from the chickpea flour. It's delicious. I'm actually making it again tonight for dinner. We have people coming over, so I'm doing that with pizza and a parsley salad. It's going to be amazing. If you make it, I hope you enjoy it. We sure love it, and I think you will too.